Hello and welcome to everyone. Today we are going to start with our discussion of Sociology paper 2, which was recently conducted just yesterday only. And again, let's have a brief discussion on what are the questions being asked and how we answer those questions based on our understanding related to Sociology optional. Now, this discussion is just for the information purposes and in no way to judge your basically score or marks in the examination. So again, this is just to add on to your existing content which probably you might have utilized in your mains answers again and again. This is to give you a sense of confidence that whatever basically being discussed in the classroom, more or less they are asked in a manner which is basically either same or slightly modified. So without many or much ado, we can start with our discussion. That goes by the question 1. That is, what according to you are the factors responsible for the continuation of caste system in India? Now, caste is simply a hereditary endogamous occupational group, and again entire unit 4 of paper 2, that is caste system, is devoted for various aspects associated with caste, and we have discussed it in much length and depth associated with the caste system. So, changes and continuity of caste already given what are the responsible factors for it, but still again we have to write this in answers. So, again we can simply highlight few of the factors for the changes and continuity in the caste system. So, caste system, we will start with our answer by defining it as a system of hereditary endogamous occupational group. One of the reason for caste system to be continued in Indian society or its perpetuation is again associated with caste based socialization. So, caste socialization means a person is informed and aware about the caste from the childhood. So, from the young age, an individual are socialized into caste and they are told about the local customs and practices, reinforcing their caste identity. Second reason for continuity of caste for so many years was their hereditary occupation, which is linked with caste system. So, hereditary occupation are going to have some kind of interlinkage with the caste system that will reinforces the caste identities. Third, we can attribute it to the rigid rule of caste endogamy. So, caste endogamy is a rule in which a member of a caste are forbidden to marry with member outside the caste. They have to choose a member from their same caste. Similarly, it was caste based basically rules, whether it is rules for education which is promoted for Dvija caste, or whether it is the basically rule for establishing who should be the rulers. So, particular caste group are given some kind of advantages and privileges. Similarly, caste is basically going to have in earlier time various reasons which is attributed by G.S. Gurye as the segmentary nature of caste, hierarchical nature of caste, endogamous nature of caste, lack of unrestricted choice of occupation, civil and religious disability and privileges, and restriction of food, drink and social intercourse. However, post independence, when government has imposes certain kind of regulation, what is the reason for continuation of caste post independence? So, the policy of reservation. In order to get the reservation in education and employment, you have to fulfill the obligation of caste certification. So, that is something which is what reason for continuation of existence of caste basically in the present context. Similarly, there is, you can say, explicit untouchability has been had, but implicit or hidden untouchability continues to exist, and in this form of implicit or hidden untouchability, we have some kind of basically recognition for some caste group which are engaged into traditional hierarchy at lower position. Then use of caste in elections and many other factors to form a dominant caste. So, this is another factor for the continuation of caste group as per M.N. Srinivas. Along with that, we can add to the factors like process of Sanskritization and process of the westernization, continuation or responsible for continuation of caste system. Along with that, many other sociologists have also highlighted various reasons, like Louis Dumas highlight the notion of purity and pollution which is in the mind of a person to identify their caste group. So, that way we can highlight that there are sufficient reason to explain that the persistence of caste system in India is emphasized or basically underpinned in its complex mix of culture, economy, polity and the social dynamics. Despite various attempts made from the government side to make India a caste-free society, again modernizing it, industrializing it, urbanizing it with legislative reform with aim to reduce the caste system and its impact, the system continued to exist. So, there is a classic line which we can write in our conclusion that caste is resilient and is considered as a chameleon which changes its form and appearance as and as there is a requirement. So, this is something which we will be writing in our answer, and anyhow we have discussed it in our basically topic. So, you can refer it from there. Next question is, discuss the changes taking place in industrial class structure in India. Now, this is from the social classes in India topic where there are industrial class structure, and we found that classes in India especially at the industrial level is multidimensional and very diverse. Unlike the industrial class structure of Europe and America, which is primarily driven by the 2 or 3 classes maximum, Indian industrial class is a hybrid version which include caste, language, class as well as caste group into that. So, we can find that India's industrial class structure is having some kind of intermix or hybridization, and it keep on getting influence and change over a period of time. So, we can simply assume that industrial class structure before the time of globalization, or let's basically focus on the time of, let's say, the independence, we find that industrial class structure is primarily driven by the ideology. And here Steiner has given some form of class structure in his book Industrial Classes. Then there is also some kind of class structure given by Krishna Kumar. Cherry and Joseph have also write about some kind of class structure. So, these pointers we will be writing in our answers. Along with that, what are the changes happen to this class structure in the industries? So, one can say that the changes in class structure most likely seen in post 1991 LPG reform. So, what are the changes happened? So, most of the manufacturing unit has started having decline and there was dismantling of the manual class. Similarly, there is a rise in managerial class after globalization or LPG reform. There is also rise in the supervisory class in the industrial class structure, and also supervisory classes are having more to say in the IT industries post 1991. Similarly, industrial class structure has been impacted by the rise of new middle class, where new middle class have the characteristic that they are geographically mobile and detached, emotionally not very attached with something, and this new middle class is marked by a higher level of education and professional skill, setting them apart from the earlier industrial class. Similarly, we have also mentioned about the reasons for the changes in class structure in industries is to fragmented working class. So, Deepankar Gupta has studied about the working class and observed that working class within the formal and informal employment are basically declining due to lack of availability of the stable income. So, fragmentation of working class is there. Similarly, there is a rise in the informal sector and gig economy. That is another factor for the decline in the working class. And also post 1997 rise of the privatization is also one of the factors which result into the working class in the industries loses the right for unionization and having a organization of protest and movement. So, we can safely assume that the transformation of India's working class from the basically independence till the post 1991 liberalization or you can say globalization era is going to basically indicate the enhancement of, you can say, the enhancement of, you can say, the social mobility and the reduction in inequality. This transformation is basically a story of India's growth, which is from industrial or manufacturing based to service oriented middle class, basically, which is dominating our, you can say, industrial class structure today. So brief may, if you can highlight, and some of the points you can follow it from here. Next question is patriarchy key to understand different form of inequality in India and Indian society? So one can highlight that patriarchy is responsible for various kinds of inequality in the form of entitlement given to the people. So one kind of entitlement which is associated with patriarchy is about lack of entitlement of the food. So in patriarchy, it is defined that who will have the access to food. So not everyone will got the equal access to the food. So patriarchy decide who will access the food, and mostly it is the male who got the first priority, creating inequality. Patriarchy decided who will inherit the property. So male are going to have a inheritance of the property instead of female. Similarly, patriarchy decide that what kind of work is performed by whom. So this is one of the factor for sexual division of labor, that how male work are different from the work done by the female. Likewise, patriarchy is also going to have a predominant basically role in identifying who will be the decision maker within a family. So decisions are taken by male or female member of the family is decided based on patriarchy. Patriarchy also played a great role in domination or decision making about the marriage. So if your marriages are to be conducted, who is going to choose the bride or the groom for you, and the role associated with leadership is also associated with it. Similarly, patriarchy is responsible for various kinds of public inequality along with private inequality in terms of the will be public and private patriarchy. So here we can found that patriarchy is to a certain extent responsible for various forms of inequality in Indian society, both internally as well as externally, and that is something which is what basically we have to highlight in this answer. Right. So straightforward question where we will be writing about the various form of inequality caused directly or indirectly due to patriarchy in our economy, in our polity, in our culture, in our social aspects. Right. Again, most of them will be highlighted by the feminist scholar. Next question. Do you think that family bonding are being affected by the changing kinship pattern in India? Comment. So when we discuss about the kinship system in India and how they are changing, we can simply highlight that kinships are the relatives or people who are with whom we are going to get related via blood or marital bond. Now again, in the kinship, what happened is that people are related to each other via blood bond or marital bond. But over a period of time, it is observed that family bonding are being affected by the changing kinship pattern in India. So earlier, kinship play a very dominant role in majority of the basically day-to-day activities. For instance, if I may tell you, kinship play a role to provide the financial support in case of some family member not surviving. So it was acting as a insurance to the family. So that is why family used to maintain the support of kins. Likewise, there is also the, you can say, kinship provide the security, playing the role of police also. Kinship within a family resolve the family disputes, and that would also act as a family court. Kinship played a very important role in deciding the inheritance right, who will inherit what. But now, which is basically the government of India rule decided, kinship play a very important role in social security to the family. So if you want to get some kind of loan, some kind of financial assistance, instead of approaching bank, we are going to have the basically kins playing this role. So all these functions of kins are one of the factors for its importance and its basically reputation in the society. However, with the changes in the society, the kinship started experiencing some kind of lack of popularity and decline. And due to this lack of popularity and decline, what started happening is that its impact is directly seen in the families. So earlier families were of joint nature, but because of decline in kinship, what happened is joint family started declining into nuclear family, and one of the factor we will attribute it to the basically kinship. It is also highlighted by M.S. Gore when he has studied the Agrarian community of Delhi. In that he found that people are living together in one place despite having the jointness, they are having the difference residence in the floors, and that is something which is what give a reference of or give a appearance of a nuclear family. Similarly, rise in individualism is also one of the factor which is associated with kinship. So in the family, with the breakdown of joint to nuclear, there is more emphasis on individualism, and this is also a testimony that there will be decline in the, you can say, traditional form of kinship system which value the jointness. Similarly, there is a change in the gender role. So change in gender role is associated with the, you can say, kinship. So participation of women in workspace or workforce is refining the family responsibility, and as Patriarchy of Rai also highlighted that one can create a stress and weaken the emotional connection within the family is also there. Fourth, we can also highlight that there is a impact of technology also. So impact of technology is basically in the form of, you can say, more and more long distance stay, which is being now facilitated by the technology. So now people are participating in the family functions through Skype or through Zoom or through other digital video basically conferences. So this is something which is helping in maintenance of the connection despite of having the, you can say, separation. Lastly, we can say that kinship now is not there. So that is also causing the intergenerational conflict within the family, and there is only the court which can have a dispute resolution on it. So these are some of the factors one can attribute that affect the family bonding, and that is directly or indirectly linked with the changing kinship pattern. So this is what we can write in our answer. Next question we will be highlighting is the despite the effort of government, bonded labor still continues in India. Discuss. So there is a clear topic on the bonded labor in India. Now this topic highlight about the role of the, you can say, government on the abolition of bonded labor. So in 1970s, government of India come forward with a landmark, you can say, policy that is going to end the bonded labor system in India once for all. And that is called as Bonded Labor Abolition Act 1976. Any person who is having a bonded labor must has to free them, and government will pay some kind of basically sum to provide the skill development to that basically release bonded labor. And unfortunately, majority of the bonded labor who got released are the member from the weaker sections of the society or marginalized sections of the society. But what happened is that, as Andre Bete says, that law only reflect the will or the vision of the society, but what is practice is basically not what law intend to. Matlab law think or law is basically formulated which is indicator of what society want in future or what society ought to, but what society is totally different. So though bonded labor is a punishable offence and it is basically illegal after Bonded Labor Abolition Act, its various forms and nature has started re-emerging. For instance, in many of the societies, bonded labors are continued with a different name. For instance, in some regions they were called as Sagri, in some region they were called as Bandhua Mazdoor, in some region they were called as Vetti, in some region they were called as Baramasiyas or basically Chhe Masiyas or something which is basically similar to that. So It is something which is what form of a modern slavery, which is driven by the complex socio-economic problem. Now, what happened is that most of the reason associated with it is highlighted by Jane Bremen. Now, what Jane Bremen has said, one of the major reason for continuation of bonded labor is debt bondage. So, debt bondage is about that you have taken debt from someone, you fail to fulfill it, and now you have to forcefully work under someone's without any wage. So, that is one of the factor. Second factor is the rise in the informal sector. So, there a person is always underpaid. So, bonded labor definition is when you hire someone without giving them wage or giving them lesser than what they deserve the wage. So, this is what mostly happening in informal sector where exploitation of labor is going on and contribution of the bonded labor is there. Similarly, we have also legal and institutional failure for controlling these incidences. So, legal and constitutional failure are also responsible factor for the bonded labor to face some kind of, you can say, sanction or ignorance from the part of, you can say, government. Also, lack of awareness is one of the factor. Many of the bonded labor also do not know that they are basically bonded against the spirit of the law. So, lack of awareness is another factor we can highlight. Similarly, there is also caste exclusion, one of the factor. A person who is excluded and boycotted from the caste have no other way to survive. So, they agree to have such kind of basically you can say exploitation without any, you can say, resistance. So, that can be one of the factor associated with bonded labor. One more reason we could highlight in our bonded labor answer is that sometime it is associated with generational bondage. What do you mean by generational bondage? So, generational bondage is when father was a bonded labor, son become bonded labor and their grandson also become the bonded labor. And this is something which is what basically create the problem intergeneration in nature, prolonging the exploitation. So, that is something which is what a concerning thing. Now, what government can do in this regard is without taking the assistance of civil society and NGO, this problem is very difficult to handle because government have a limited access to the implementation of law, but if it is happening in a hidden or clandestine manner, it is very difficult to cater. So, again we can have some of the suggestions include strict enforcement of the law that will combat the bonded labor, again strong public awareness and participation. Along with that, awareness generation and addressing of the poverty and inequality could be in a long term going to resolve this problem of bonded labor, which is a slavery. Slavery abolished hundreds of years ago, but still its remnants is continued to manifest in one or the other form. So, that is something which is concerning. Next question is, these are the causes of bonded labor which we have to discuss. Next question is, differentiate between Western and Indological perspective on study of Indian society, bring out the major aspect of G.S. Ghurye contribution to the Indological approach. Straightforward question where we have to highlight how Indological approach is totally different from the Western basically perspective. So, when the Western scholars came to India to study about Indian society for the purpose to understand it and rule it, again the simultaneous time there was emergence of Indological perspective. So, Indology is simply a systematic study of Indian society. Hold on for a second. So, when the Britishers went to Egypt, they have initiated Egyptology. When they have been to China, Sinology is initiated. Again, when they are in India, they have introduced Indology. So, in 1784, there was introduction of basically the you can say Asiatic Society of Bengal, and in this Asiatic Society of Bengal, one of the subject which is taught is Sanskrit, another subject is Indology. So, along with basically the Sanskrit teaching, again they have started to study India from a perspective which is later on called as Indology. So, technically saying Indological perspective is much earlier in India present before the presence of actual sociology which started in 1919 Bombay University as a academic discipline. Now, what is the difference? So, Indological perspective attempt to understand India through the unique cultural and historical, you can say, perspective. On the other hand, Western perspective try to impose the Western theories and Western ideas and Western mindset to understand and study the Indian society. Now, G.S. Gurye, who is rightly considered as father of Indian society, Indian sociological basically society, is one of the, you can say, captain of the Indian sociology and instrumental in advancing the Indological approach. Now, he was basically in his lifetime has written about 32 books and hundreds of articles on various topics from a Indological perspective. Now, what he did is basically foremost of contribution is that he has provided us, you can say, perspective to study India. He was on favor that Western theories and Western concepts are not suitable to apply in India. So, we need an Indian basically original thought to study the Indian society. So, he uses text to understand context, and that is why his approach is also called as book view. He read religious and non-religious books and understand the Indian society through those lenses of the book. Similarly, his focus was on universality to identify the universal law, sometimes neglecting the specific, you can say, cultural aspect which Indologists have highlighted. So, Britishers were not interested into knowing the basically Indian perspective. Similarly, the Indological perspective are actually focusing on Indian society and try to understand it through its culture, through its basically, you can say, various aspects of the history and the religious texts. It is going to emphasize on the tradition, highlighting the traditional aspects as well as trying to synthesize both sociological analysis and research with Indological, you can say, perspective. So, that way you can highlight that G.S. Gurye attempt to have an ethnographic view, and he was not averse to other methods, but he preferred to have a basically book view to study on various other things, right. Now, his study has introduced the correlation between caste and races in India. So, Race and Caste in India in 1932 was his first book. Similarly, he has also gave a great depth of observation related data of customs and ritual. So, in his study on book on Bharatanatyam, he has given us detail about it. He has also written on the unique nature of Indian sadhu in his book Indian Sadhu in 1950s, where he talked about that Indian sadhus are actually working as a judge for dispute resolution, as well as despite of renunciation, they are not technically renunciated from the Indian civilization values, and they promote the Indian civilization values wherever they approach. Likewise, it is also acting as a critique to the Western model, who try to see a Indian society from a Eurocentric bias perspective. So, that way you will say that Indology is going to have a basically establish the mark of Indian society and Indian sociology into the global academic world, which is something which was new in the, you can say, that time. Ultimately, conclusion में ये लिख सकते हैं कि both have tried to understand India from a different lenses. One is from the Western perspective, other is from the Indian perspective, and again both have tried indirectly or directly to enrich the Indian sociology with more ideas. So, that is another question. Next question is about what are the definitional problem of the involved in the identification of the tribe. Discuss the main obstacle to the tribal development in India. So, we have already discussed about it, that majority of the different scholars have highlighted the problem in tribal development. So, unlike the tribe in Australia, China or Africa, Indian tribe are not monoracial, monolingual, monocultural. Our tribal are multilingual, multiracial and multicultural, due to which identifying and recognizing the tribe in India present a significant challenge. Now, major reason for that is its diversity, which is why we have multiple definition of the tribe. Some called Indian tribe as Adivasi, some called them Aboriginal, some called them backward Hindus, some called them the basically primitive tribes, and so on and so forth. So, this is something which is creating a problem. Now, defining tribe is difficult. Why? Because tribe is highly heterogeneous in India. They vary from highly underdeveloped like Jarawas in Andaman Two, highly developed like Minas in Rajasthan and Negis in Himachal. They also have a distinct culture and habitats, occupation and lifestyle. So, these are some of the points which we have taken from the book. Straightforward, the question has also been asked. Now, British have tried to define that from the colonial point of view. So, British view whole of Indian society in terms of single community, and that is largely inward looking. So, those living in villages and practicing agriculture were termed as caste. Those who were living in cities were referred as basically the tribal. Sorry, those who were living in forests were referred as tribal. Right. So, that is a very narrow perspective. But however, Indian sociologists have tried to define it from the various perspective, like there was basically perspective given by LP Vidyarthi, there was perspective given by G.S. Guha, there was perspective given by G.S. Gurye and basically many other sociologists. So, these are some of the aspects which we can write. Next question is, what according to Andre Bete are the basis of agrarian class structure in India? So, basis of agrarian class structure as per Andre Bete are two. One is the basically technological arrangement, which include the ecological condition along with new agriculture technology, and again other is basically the sociological arrangement or social arrangement in which they are identified on the basis of land ownership and other. So, these two are the basis to identify the agrarian class structure in India. Now, what is the question says is that agrarian class structure in India is also highlighted by various other sociologists in different manner. So, like Daniel Thorner has talked about the concept of Malik Kisan Mazdoor, who is going to be owner, cultivator and the landless laborers respectively. Utsa Patnaik categorized the Indian agrarian class into two. One is exploited class, one is exploiting class. Then there were also different other scholars like D.N. Dhanagre has given a categorization of rich landlord, the rich peasant, farmers and the agricultural laborers. So, these were some of the categorization. Now, agrarian class structure is something which is an introduction of class in the rural area, which is until now dominated by caste. So, caste and class interface is what happened in rural India, which is risen during the time of Green Revolution. Now, Green Revolution has caused the prosperity in the villages and among the agrarian classes, resulting into more emergence of the rich farmers, and that is something which is what Andre Bete is speaking about. So, that is how we can highlight. So, that Andre Bete applied the Weberian perspective to understand the classes development in rural or agrarian India from a point of view that again multiple factors are responsible for that development. So, he has highlighted about the two factors. Next question is, why is the study of marriage important in sociology? Analyze the implication of changing marriage pattern in Indian society. So, when we talk about marriage, we can simply define that it is a universal institution that accord the social legitimacy to the mating relationship and subsequent children. Now, why study of marriage is important? So, when we study the marriage system in India, again we get to know about whether the basically association is considered as sacred or contractual. If it is sacred, there will be no divorce. If it is contractual, definitely there will be divorce. Marriage also is a basically institution that legitimizes the sexual behavior of a person to whom they are allowed to have an intercourse with and whom they are not allowed to have. Similarly, marriage is considered as a form of a union, not just between the two person, but also two family, and it is a way of social bonding. Levi-Strauss called that as a form of alliance making instead of calling it marriage or some kind of association. Similarly, what are the implications of changing marriage pattern in Indian society? So, when we talk about the changing marriage pattern in Indian society, we can simply say that there were rise in various kinds of pattern in present time. For example, rise in the homosexual marriages is happening, rise in the intercaste marriages is happening, rise in the interfaith marriages are happening, rise in the live-in relationship where couple used to reside together without any marital basically bond is also happening. So, that indicate that Indian society is having a transformation from being the traditional form of marriages to the modern or the diverse form of marriages, indicating that Indian sociology is considering marriage as an important, you can say, institution for understanding the Indian society from the lenses of, you can say, marriages, right. Next question is, do you think that constitutional provision for women have led to their upliftment? Give reason for your answer. So there is a detailed discussion in the book itself has been made, which is under the chapter of vision of social change in India. So law, again, constitution, law and social change. If you open that booklet, you will find that various articles and provisions are there in the constitution highlighted. Article 14, Article 15, Article 99, Article 42, Article 51. They all are directly or indirectly benefiting the women. With some article, we have been successful in abolition of the basically inequality among the women. For instance, Article 14 talk about equality of law and equal protection of law. So under this, there were Equal Remuneration Act. Under this, all women were considered to be equal at par with their male in basically matters related to law. Second is Article 15 Clause 3, in which special provisions are made for women, whether it is including the Protection of Women Against Domestic Violence Act or the basically Dowry Prohibition Act. Then we talked about Article 40, which is about the reservation of women in panchayat seats. We have 1/3 seats reserved for the women in panchayat. Similarly, Article 42 talked about the maternity benefit and free child care. We will basically define on all the, you can say, provisions which are benefiting the women through the constitution directly or indirectly. If simply we have to write, we can simply write it will give them power to basically have right to equality. It will give them legal empowerment. It will also highlight various basically protection like protection against the sexual harassment at workplace. It will give the right to participation in politics, which is 33% of reservation in constitution, and other basically you can say bodies. Vidhan Sabha and Lok Sabha also are now under that. So these are the highlighting point we can write. Next question is, education is the key to social development. Elucidate. So education is considered as a vehicle of modernity. Education is considered as a greatest equalizer. Education is considered to provide a level playing field to a vulnerable and marginalized sections which has faced discrimination since historical time. So education is something which is considered to create a, you can say, change in the social order, and it is a key to social development. So when we talk about education and social change and how it is going to impact on the social development, so we can say that first and foremost, education liberate a person from the conservative traditional mindset, where this person is going to have the hierarchical non-democratic view which is now being taken care of by the education. Similarly, education will basically provide a sense of equality to the person who is living in the society with marginalization. Education will open new doors for source of employment and the placement of a person, which gave them some sense of, you can say, employment and the opportunity to have a earning potential. Similarly, education is going to broaden the mindset of a person, through which that person is going to have more and more development, social, economic as well as political. So in a way we can say that education is key driver for the social development, whether we talk about the mobility brought by social education, or we brought about the basically form of, you can say, the social capital which is bring by the education. So these things you have to highlight. So simply if you have to write an answer, focus on writing the education role in transmission of knowledge. Also, education going to have some kind of impact on social inequality. So education provide that impact on social inequality. Similarly, we have some kind of social integration and cohesion which is brought by education. Similarly, we have the collective identity which is brought by the education, that is homogenization. We all are Indian, we all are from the same Indian society. So that feeling which Emile Durkheim has brought into his notion of collective homogenization is also there, which is brought through education. And all social development, which include all the section of the society, making it inclusive, is going to happen. So, these are some of the factors we will be highlighting. However, many sociologists were critical of this. Like Bourdieu says that education will have some barrier. Then you will have many other sociologists like Basil Bernstein, who has highlighted that education will create a new form of inequality. Bowles and Gintis in his book American Occupational Structure highlighted the critical role of education in restricting the opportunity to the people who are basically going to have access to the education. So, these are some of the restrictions associated with education forewarned by the members of the sociological fraternity, but that is what it is we can mention, right. Next is, how do religious community contribute to the cultural diversity of India? So, religion is part of, you can say, belief and matter of faith. Again, India's rich cultural diversity also include one of the dimension in terms of various religion coexisting in India peacefully and in a harmonic manner for centuries. Now, religious communities in India are not in one, rather they are large in number and they added to the diversity of the India. How? So, because each religious community in India celebrate distinct festivals such as Diwali, Christmas or Vaishakhi, again this has created the diversity in terms of festival which is part of culture. Similarly, we have the architectural contribution based on different religious structures like temple, mosque, churches and gurudwara. Similarly, there is a culinary diversity. Religious dietary practices such as vegetarianism or the non-vegetarianism among the different communities have credited to bring some of the different variety of the food and cuisine available in Indian society. Also, different religious tradition deeply influencing the Indian music forms like Bharatanatyam, Kathak, dance and also Sufi music or Bhakti songs and all that. Similarly, language and literature is also having a tinge of or touch of religion, where religious scripture in languages like Sanskrit, Arabic and Gurumukhi have shaped the India's linguistic diversity. Likewise, religion also encourage the different kinds of dressing pattern, social norms and values, which is resulting into enrichment of the cultural diversity. So, in conclusion, we can simply say that religious communities in India significantly shape the country's cultural diversity, contributing through the festivals, architecture, cuisines, art, basically forms, and various scholars have basically emphasized on this contribution of the religion in developing our cultural diversity. What do you understand by decentralization of power? What is its role in strengthening the roots of democracy in India? So, when we talk about the decentralization of power, it is paper 2 topic politics and society, where power is not remain central, rather power is dispersed. So, decentralization of power involve transferring of some of the administrative, financial and the political power to the local government. And this process is actually essential for enhancing the decentralization of the democratic governance. This process of decentralization make decision making process closer to people, and the various pluralists who are Robert Dale or other people have emphasized on the importance of decentralization in promoting the citizens' participation. We can say that democratic responsiveness in India is associated with that. Now, what is the, you can say, possible role of decentralization of power in strengthening the democracy in India? So, for with 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, a single stroke of the pen, it is said that India's democracy has been basically representative transformed into participative democracy, with local people started participating in decision making. Similarly, political decentralization has resulted into decision making process done through local elections at the grassroots level. Now, they are having the control over the expenditure of the budget and finances. So, they started making their budget what is important for them and become part and parcel of the democratic process. Similarly, democratic decentralization has also a role to play in empowerment. Like in India's political decentralization, we have reserved 1/3 seat for the member of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe along with women. This will give equal say to the member of lower caste in or lower tribal community or gender women in decision making power, giving them autonomy. And lastly, we can say that it enhances the local governance, which is going to play a very important role in providing the solution which is unique to that particular area. However, it is also true that most of these reforms do not reach to the grassroots because of the domination of one group over the other. Now, many of the incidences of violence is also basically testimony to this fact. So, Gail Ombet has write about this, that all these things cannot be, you can say, brush aside, rather it is bringing a silent revolution in Indian society, transforming it from the traditional to modern society. So, that we can highlight in our answer. Next question is about what are the different forms of untouchability still practiced in India? Discuss with suitable illustration. So, untouchability, its form and perspective. Various forms of untouchability is followed in Indian society. When we discuss in detail, we can say that there is a form of untouchability which will deliberately responsible for creating exclusion among the people. Similarly, another form of untouchability is indicating the basically your exploitation or humiliation of the person who is from the lower caste. Similarly, there are abolition of untouchability since 1950, but still caste based discrimination and untouchability practice happen in different forms in a implicit manner. So, these are examples which is forms of untouchability like restriction of people from the untouchable ancestry to secret places to draw the water or enter into some, you can say, religious institution. Second is what about the sociological explanation. So, M.N. Srinivas has also highlighted that exclusion of people in residence in the village is also continued. Social segregation is continued in colonies. Often they are forced to live in the outskirts of the villages or the locality. Gail Ombet has highlighted that segregation is more symbolic and cultural also, not just basically residential. There is a discrimination in economic activity which is also a form of untouchability. Similarly, they were having some kind of, you can say, forbidden to have a participation in many of the economic activities because of the caste based reason, and Sukhdev Tharoor has argued that economic discrimination reinforce Dalit class lower status. Violence and atrocities are some of the common factors they will face if they try to assert themselves. Likewise, weak law enforcement is also one of the factors that affect them, despite law like scheduled caste and scheduled tribe prevention of atrocities acts were there. So, all these factors are going to have a say in the, you can say, day to day activities of the caste group. Next is examine with suitable example the recent trend in the growth of urban settlement. So, there is a straightforward question in which the recent growth of urban settlement is seen, where there are different formats of urban settlement. One is the linear form of settlement, other is the nuclear form of settlement, third is the cluster form of settlement of urban areas. Now, recent trend in growth of urban settlement is also seen with the rise in urbanization. India is one of the you can say fast urbanizing country in the world, though it is currently having 31.16% population lives in urban area. It definitely had the more basically growth rate in urbanization. Now, when we talk about the settlement pattern, we observed that there is a global urban trends providing insight into similar pattern in India, like development of mega cities, development of satellite towns, development of socio-economic centers of growth, and this is what we are going to highlight. So, first and foremost thing that if we see today, development of mega cities including Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, Bangalore have grown with higher population exceeding 10 millions, and this is leading to challenges like water clogging, traffic congestion, pollution and all. Delhi is classic example of it, where it is no more remain a city but a agglomerates of various cities called Delhi NCR. Similarly, because of the rising population, there is need to fulfill their needs with which results into rise in the satellite town and urban corridors like Gurgaon, Noida, Badlapur, or basically various other regions which are developed in the locality of urban area. Similarly, we will also found that there are many, you can say, smart cities missions going on, which is going to develop 100 cities of India at par with a smart city. However, all this urban settlement, instead of getting planned in nature, have unplanned characteristics, and due to that, urban poverty and slum development become a problem. Like Dharavi is having Asia's largest slum. Again, we have slums in Delhi, we have slums in Chennai. Environmental challenge is another factor which result into pollution, water scarcity and destruction of wetland and all. Again, urban flooding is another factor. So, these are something which is an example of unplanned urbanization creating some trouble. This is what we have also asked in our test paper, or you can say test series, which you can verify also, outline the changes in urban settlement pattern in India. Right. Now, next question is there any connection between the labor migration and informal sector? Justify your answer with reference to India. So, if you find any kind of connection between the labor migration and informal sector, so when we talk about the informal sector in India, informal sector is mostly dominated by the laborers who are migrating from the rural to urban pocket. In fact, Jean Bremen has called them as footloose laborers, or simply the migrant laborers who are joining the informal sector, because one of the characteristic of informal sector is that majority of people it hire is not from the local areas, they are from the neighboring region, which is basically considered as preferred because nobody knows them, right. So, when we write an answer, we will briefly define the migration as well as informal sector. So, informal sector in economics is defined as those sectors which hire technically less than 10 people in their firms, and they are not under the regulation of labor laws. So, labor migration from rural to urban area is one of the dominant factor which is going to contribute in the, you can say, informal form of labor sector, right. Jean Bremen has talked about it and talked about basically footloose labor, as I have mentioned also. Now, most of the migrants are the one who engage into informal sector, and what is the reason for them to engage into informal sector? So, it provides them some kind of economic security. Similarly, it is also responsible for providing them some kind of, you can say, engagement into earning or engagement into some productive economy. Similarly, they will give them some kind of, you can say, guarantee, sorry, it is outcome of scarcity of formal job. Also, it is creating some kind of informal way of, you can say, working. So, rise in informal sector associated with gig economy. Some people also say that it is giving them some kind of freedom or liberty to work whenever they want, wherever they want. So, these are some of the factors which is attracting large scale migration or migrant worker to work in informal sector, right. Next question. All this detail has been given in the booklet, and we have also covered this topic in our analyze the growth of informal sector in India in our test series. Next is, are slum manifestation of industrialization and urbanization in India? Explain. So, when we talk about slum, slum is any compact housing cluster of 20 households with poor infrastructure and lack of sanitation facility. When we are going to have a discussion on slum, naturally industrialization and urbanization in India, which is of unplanned nature, is blamed for. So, here we can see that socio-economic impact of industrialization on the lower class in India with focus on slum and ghettos. Again, direct question we have been asking in the examination has been appeared in the actual UPSC. So, we can simply write on that part that industrialization has created the shortage of space where people are settled down into a cluster, and since there is no space left, so majority of the people find it very expensive to settle down, and they prefer to start living in some unorganized, unhygienic place, which is later on identified as ghetto or slum. Now, again, urbanization, which is not very planned, is also blamed for the rising in slum. You do never find slum in villages. Mostly slums are the characteristic of cities, and those cities which is having no way of formal planning, and this is something which is basically what we have to highlight in our answer, so that we can easily do in this particular question. Next question, discuss the changing nature of political elites in India. So, when we talk about the political elites, we talked about the rural and urban elite as well, and in this changing nature of urban or rural elite is that one factor which is found out is increase in the educated or literate elites. Second thing is the elites are also coming from the middle classes in large number. Third factor we can found is all the elites are the one which are emotionally detached and de-ritualized, meaning they are not very much affected by the ritualism or some kind of traditional thought process. Fourth factor we can highlight is that they are geographically mobile, meaning they can ready to serve themselves in any place, in any capacity, and they are basically highly ambitious. So these are the 5 factors we can highlight on the changing nature of political elites in India, and majority of them are coming from the young sections of the population, which slightest of them are also the, you can say, son and the daughter of existing politicians. So that is what we can highlight in our answer. This is what detail given, we can always have a reference. This is also we have asked in our test series, examine the changes in the structure of political elites. Next is, what is your assessment about the recent farmer movement in India? So when we talk about the farmer movement in India, the latest farmer movement is always in news. Now, the new farmer movement, what we have seen in the last 2 years back in India, was primarily an attribution of the new form of social movement, where it is not inclusive to one particular ideology, one particular leader, one particular organization and one particular way of mobilization. Rather, it is ideologically, you can say, inclusive. So in farmer movement, we find people from all the basically sectors. Industrialists have supported, movie actors have supported, the local basically people have supported, activists have supported. So people from vast section have come forward. Similarly, in this basically farmer movement, we found out that there is also the organization missing. There is not a single leader or organization. It was a polycephalous, meaning multiple leaders are there with multiple broad basically ideas to pursue. Similarly, they misses out any local way of protest and organization. Again, they were having Twitter campaigns, they were having ads in the international forums, they were having more and more basically, you can say, social media usage, and these are some of the factors which is going to affect on the farmers movement in India. So again, assessment of the farmer movement is that instead of becoming more an identity focused movement, it is becoming more a kind of class focused movement in which you will have identity is intermixed with caste identity, religious identity, professional identity, and trying to include various other identity into it. So it is not just about the farmers, it is about the basically people who are discontented with the, you can say, laws and rules, and they find a motivation to vent out all their discontent. Right. Next is, discuss the major challenges related to women reproductive health in India. What measures would you suggest to overcome the challenges? So when we talk about reproductive health in India, we have to basically accept that it is one of the most neglected section of basically healthcare. Now, reproductive health is actually defined by WHO as a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being in all matters relating to the reproductive system at all stages of life, and not merely absence of reproductive diseases. It deals with the reproductive processes, functions at all stages of life. Now, good reproductive health implies that person is able to have a safe and satisfying sexual life, capability to reproduce as and when they want. So this is what the reproductive health. And the question says, what measure would you suggest to overcome these challenges? So one of the factors which is caused due to ignorance of the reproductive health is the increase in the rise of, you can say, the sexually transmitted disease. Second is the, you can say, infertility. Third is the reproductive tract infection. Fourth is the chances of HIV and other basically disease. Fifth is the problem associated with the, you can say, lack of awareness among them. So what measure would you suggest to overcome these challenges? One measure is to encourage the health education in the form of sex education in the school curriculum, so that awareness should be there. Other mediums or channels should be utilized for basically generating some awareness among the basically adolescent who are most of the time victim of misinformation or no information at all, and all this basically can be taken care with the help of private sector as well as public sector cooperation. So that is something which are the issues, emerging concern, gynecological problem, menstrual problem, reproductive tract infection, STD, criminal abortion, infertility, that can be dealt with more and more basically awareness generation, and the programs for that will help in longer term for overcoming this problem. What is sustainable development? How can we sustainability be achieved in India where livelihood needs conflict with environment protection? So this is the topic of unit 15, that is challenges of social transformation. Now what is sustainable development? So sustainable development is a development that fulfill the need of present generation without compromising the ability of future generation to fulfill their need. Now when we talk about sustainable development, it sounds like a first world country problem, which is countries like USA or Europe. However, it is also a global problem. Sustainable development is not a basically a particular region centric problem. So if we do not develop keeping our environment in concern, chances are highly likely that we will lose whatever resources we have got, and that will create problem not just for us but for entire world. So first thing is that sustainable development should not be looked from a narrow lenses of a developed world problem and not developing world problem. Second, how can sustainability be achieved in India? So most basically of the environmental movement in India likely to be caused by or initiated by the weaker section, because ultimately the disadvantage of the unplanned development which harm the nature and environment is paid by the common people who are poor. For instance, there was a Chipko movement in 1972. Now, if you see the Chipko movement, it was primarily launched not by some social activists, rather launched by the women of the Chamoli region, who are going to adversely affect by the, you can say, cutting down of the trees in their neighboring region. They are looking for some kind of, you can say, the fuel wood from the forest, and now they have no such fuel would possibly get. So what they did, in order to protect the environment and the trees from falling down by the sports factory which got the land allocated by the government of that time, they have started embracing the trees, hugging the tree, and basically stick to the tree. And due to that, what happened is that government come under pressure, international media highlighted it, and government has to backtrack from its, you can say, decision to provide this you can say region for the sports factory establishment. So it was a weaker section who have launched this movement. So this is not confrontation with a, you can say, livelihood needs, rather it is in sync with livelihood need. Similarly, there was Niamgiri region where a bauxite mining is to be established by Vedanta Corporation. Unfortunately, the Dongriya Kond tribe which were living over there started basically protesting on it, and when they started protesting about it, again government come under pressure, and due to which they have to cancel this mining license. Again here there is no fancy you can say activist who has gone to the field to protest. Again these were the indigenous tribal people who consider that Niamgiri is the place of God, and they would not let it basically explode by a mining company. So these are some of the example which you quote in your answer to explain that how it is not in confrontation or conflict with the livelihood needs of India or environmental protection. So that way we can highlight. One more example you can give is of Narmada Bachao Andolan, which is also launched by the leaders, but at the same time got the huge support among the tribal and the poor section of population in Madhya Pradesh. So here our movement of environment are called as empty stomach movement, which is for survival. On the other hand, full stomach movement is what northern hemisphere protesters go for, where they were considering participating in sustainable development movement for environment protection as a fancy thing. Here it is a survivalistic thing. We have already asked this in our previous questions, like conflict between rapid urbanization and sustainable development. Next. Next question is critically examine the relevance of development planning in India. So again, when you plan for the development, it is going to give you a positive outcome in terms of growth. So planned development in India began in 1950s with the first 5-year plan. And when we see the question is about the examination of this development planning. So problem was that because of this developmental planning, what happened is that planning become more centralized. Started from Delhi, it is reaching to the grassroots, which is creating a problem. Similarly, it create a problem of one size fit all, meaning one solution is given to all the problems to basically solve, which is not going to be feasible in diverse country like India. Similarly, fund dispersal is also more centralized rather than decentralized. Policy implementation is also centralized than decentralized, and many such things has affected the developmental process. Again, this is something which has more harm to the development of India rather than basically creating a mechanism for development. So, critically we can say that 5-year plan is a failed project which is causing the entire development planning to a toss. Right. So, next is analyze the trilogy between environment, movement, development and tribal identity. So, when we talk about trilogy, we have to highlight that tribal are also one of the worst victim of development, and so is the environmental basically protection affected by the, you can say simply, the developmental project. So, these three are going to create a three corner of a triangle and they are having some kind of interrelation. So, whenever any developmental project initiated, one of the first victim of it is the tribal population. Now, when we discuss about the tribal population, they are voiceless and marginalized. Whenever they are developed, they are displaced, they are feeling jobless, hunger, suffer from hunger and morbidity, marginalization and many other problems, and that is something they are basically making them a victim of the, you can say, development. In fact, Walter Fernandez in his study found out that despite tribal are 8.6% of the India's population, since the independence, whenever development has been initiated, tribal displacement has been, out of total displacement, 42%. So, tribal are, you can say, victim of the unplanned development. Similarly, environmental movement has been launched majority of the places by the tribal community, because they are the one who are the real stakeholder of protecting the environment which they have preserved for centuries together, again did not allow anyone to exploit them. So, this is something which we will be highlighting, that they strongly placed two things against one, that is environmental protection, and tribal against the development. So, there is a solution for it, that is sustainable development, which will deal with the problem of unplanned development causing more harm, which is including development induced displacement and many other stuff. Next is, to what extent have the legal provision been effective in curbing violence against women in India? Give your argument. So, when we see this question, legal provision is reflecting the same answer which we have referred in constitution. So, when we talk about the violence against the women, again legal provision is Protection of Women Against Domestic Violence Act. Similarly, Dowry Prohibition Act. Similarly, the Maternity Benefit Act. Similarly, the legislation which is called as your, you can say, Abortion Legalization Act, which is Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. So, all these laws are actually going to protect the women. Along with that, there is also further laws passed. For instance, there is a law called as Suppression of Immoral Trafficking Prevention Act, which is now called as Immoral Trafficking Prevention Act, ITPA, which is to protect the women from trafficking. Similarly, there were Criminal Law Amendment Act, which has been making the rape or other violence against the women as a higher punishable offense, and all this basically aspects we can highlight in our answer, and this is what we have asked in our test series as well. Next question is, trace the social and historical origin of Dalit movement in modern India. So, again Dalit movement has been considered to be originated since the inception of British rule India, because they have been playing their divide and rule, and for them Dalits were one of the group who were being victim of the marginalization and historical injustice. So, they started instigating or encouraging them with provision of Dalit basically in army, military as well as the administration through various mechanisms like reservation. So, many people say that the Britishers initiation is one of the reason for the origin of Dalit movement in India. However, the true origin is attributed to Jyotiba Phule, who has started writing in favor of vulnerable and weaker marginalized untouchable who were called as Dalit. Now, they are the one earlier who were fighting for equality, and now they are fighting for justice. So, over a period of time we have various basically, you can say, stages of evolution post-independence of Dalit movement, and these are the main issues which they have been highlighting. One among them is implementation of universal adult franchise, where Dalits were given freedom to freely pursue who they want to choose without any coercion. Similarly, reservation in education and political institution. Third is politicization of the Dalit. Fourth is annihilation of the caste system with more awareness, education and agitation. Eradication of the discrimination on the basis of birth, that is caste or gender. Social justice, equality of status and empowerment of subaltern group of population. And these are the similar question we have also basically asked in our test series. Next is highlight the major contribution of reform movement in pre-independent India. So we have many reform movement in pre-independent India, which is for women. So we have discussed about it, that there is a Women India Association, there were reform movement called as Arya Mahila Samaj for education, there is Sakhi Samiti which is for skill development and training to the young widows, there were a movement called as Bharat Stri Mahamandal which is for creating a pressure group of women, then Bharat Mahila Parishad which is to fight against the, you can say, dowry and you can say the child marriages, and many such basically organization before pre-independent India highlighting the, you can say, reform in the society. Not just that, we have to also highlight not just for the, you can say, reform movement for women, there is also religious reform movement. So Arya Samaj movement was one such movement. Then you have reform movement for the Aligarh Muslim Universities movement, or Aligarh movement is also reform movement for the Muslim. Similarly, there is a Singh Sabha movement for reform in Sikhism and other basically reform movement we can highlight. Next is identify the different forms of inequality associated with agrarian social structure in India, and again inequalities in agrarian social structure, as we were earlier also discussing about the social arrangement and technological arrangement responsible for it. But different form of inequality is not associated with agrarian social structure based on you can say caste only, but there is also a role of class. So different agrarian social inequality associated with class, agrarian class structure, caste, agrarian caste groups. Then land ownership is also becoming one of the factors separately along with class. Then there is some kind of dominant caste group also creating a problem of inequality. Then there is some form of Sanskritization causing some issues in that. So you can highlight all this as a factors for, you can say, the inequalities in the agrarian areas or structure in India. Then you will have next question, what are the pressure group? Discuss their role in decision making in democracy. So pressure group are actually a form of organization which exert pressure on the political or administrative system of the country to extract benefit out of it and advance their own interests. So this is what we define for the pressure group, right? Now there are many types of pressure group. We have again their role in decision making. So one is called as associative pressure group, which is associated with government like IAS association. There is disassociative or you can say non-associative pressure group which are not part of it but try to exert pressure like Bharatiya Kisan Union and other. Similarly, there are anomic pressure group like Naxalites who are exerting pressure. Then there are institutional pressure group who are part and parcel of institutions and they organize some kind of basically protests and marches. Then there is protective and promotional pressure group. So protective matlab protection of something like environment protection and all. Promotional pressure group is promoting the integrity and honesty like India against corruption and all. So these pressure group play a very important role as acting as a watchdog of the basically watchdog on the government. They are also acting as a, you can say, organization which play an important role in suppressing the chances of bribe and corruption by ensuring accountability and you can say transparency, and likewise many other functions they wish to perform. So this is something which we have already covered in our topic and of pressure group in our classroom discussion. Again various types of pressure groups are highlighted. This was also our question in our test series. Now this is about our discussion on the sociology paper for paper 2. Hope you have got some kind of information and learning from the discussion we have, though we will also upload the, you can say, PDF of the, you can say, paper soon, but again you have to approach the institute for that. Again, I hope your examination went well and you will have a satisfaction when you have appeared in examination that nothing asked was basically surprising or out of syllabus or something which is unique or peculiar. Only thing that was needed to excel in this paper was your self confidence and awareness about the all topic which you definitely would have covered during your preparation, right? Last but not the least, as they say that वो खुद ही तय करते हैं मंजिलें आसमानों की, परिंदों को नहीं दी जाती तालीम उड़ानों की. So in the same manner, when we are basically discussing it, we believe that you are already aware of the information we have been providing, but just basically brushing up of basically this information will give you a sense of confidence so that you can estimate that you will get good score and prepare or start preparation for your personality test in advance itself. So hope that all of you qualify in your basically dream job for basically interviews, and wish you all the very best for your endeavor. This is all from our side, and thanks to all of you who have patiently watched us for so long time. Thank you everyone. Have a great time, guys.